A tourist hurled a stone toward the royal horse, mocking centuries-old traditions, and believing his status as a visitor gave him the right to do anything. But the Queen's Guard's response was so swift and commanding, it left the crowd in stunned silence. What happened next changed everything for the tourist and everyone watching. Let's start from the beginning. The day was as British as a cup of tea with a biscuit. Crisp air, the faint aroma of roasted chestnuts wafting through the streets, and the iconic Tower Bridge gleaming under the midday sun. Tourists swarmed the area, cameras clicking incessantly as they jockeyed for the perfect selfie with the stoic Queen's Guard stationed by the royal stables. The guard, a picture of discipline, stood motionless. His tall bearskin hat and immaculate red coat were symbols of unwavering tradition. People waved, pulled faces, and even tried barking commands at him, but he didn't so much as blink. He was the embodiment of British resolve, an unshakable rock amidst a sea of chaos. And then, as if summoned by fate to disrupt the serenity, stepped out Douglas Patterson from Minnesota. Dressed in a crumpled t-shirt that read, "Keep calm and drink beer," he clutched his phone in one hand and a precariously full coffee cup in the other. His swagger was unmistakable, the kind of walk that screamed, "I'm here to conquer, or at least go viral trying." Douglas took one sweeping look at the guard, smirking as he turned to his imaginary audience, which, naturally, was everyone within earshot. "Yo, is this seriously your job? Just standing there like a mannequin?" His voice cut through the air, dripping with mockery. The crowd reacted with a mix of chuckles and groans. Some pulled out their phones, sensing that whatever came next might be worth filming. Doug, noticing the sudden attention, puffed up his chest. He was ready for his big moment. "Come on, man, give us a smile. I'm paying for this show after all," he quipped, gesturing grandly with his coffee cup as if he'd just bought tickets to a West End play. The guard, predictably, did not react. But there was a tension in the air now, a silent acknowledgement that Doug had crossed some invisible line. The crowd murmured. A gray-haired gentleman leaned toward his wife, shaking his head. "Disgraceful. These people have no respect for tradition anymore." Yet Doug was undeterred. In fact, he seemed to thrive on the disapproval. He stepped closer, peering up at the towering bearskin hat, with a glint of mischief in his eye. "What's this thing made of, huh? Can I touch it?" "Oh, wait, let me guess. It's sacred or something?" His fingers hovered near the edge of the hat as the crowd collectively gasped. Still, the guard didn't budge. His grip on the reins of the regal black horse tightened slightly, but his posture remained resolute. The horse, however, wasn't as forgiving. It huffed loudly, its breath misting in the cool air, and stamped a hoof against the cobblestone. "Whoa, easy there, big guy," Doug chuckled, taking a half step back. But instead of backing off, he decided to up the ante. With a flick of his wrist, he tossed the remaining contents of his coffee cup toward the ground, narrowly missing the horse's hooves. "Let's see how British this horse really is," he declared, bending down to pick up a loose cobblestone from the edge of the pavement. The crowd collectively froze. This wasn't cheeky banter anymore, it was crossing the line. Gasps rippled through the spectators, and a few even tried to intervene. "Hey, leave the horse alone," a woman shouted, clutching her child's hand tightly. Doug, emboldened by the commotion, grinned like a kid with a new toy. "Relax, it's just a joke," he said, waving off the protests as he lobbed the stone in the horse's direction. The stone hit the ground with a sharp clink, but the message was clear. This was no longer about a playful photo op. It was a direct challenge, a blatant show of disrespect. And for the first time all day, the guard moved. The cobblestone hit the ground with a sharp clink, landing squarely on the forbidden white line, a boundary that no one with an ounce of respect would dare approach, let alone cross. The crowd collectively sucked in their breath, their murmurs fading into an eerie silence. Even the air seemed to still, as if holding its own judgment. The Queen's Guard shifted. His hand, previously resting with unwavering composure at his side, rose sharply. The signal was clear. A boundary, both literal and symbolic, had been violated. His movement broke the stillness of the scene, and for the first time, all eyes, cameras included, locked onto him. The horse snorted, its nostrils flaring as it stamped the ground, sending a soft echo through the square. Its rider tightened his grip on the reins, steady but deliberate. Someone in the crowd whispered nervously, "He's going to regret this. You don't mess with the guard." But Doug, oblivious to the gravity of the moment, merely laughed, and not just a chuckle. "Oh no!" He launched into a full-blown jig, waving his phone in one hand like a trophy. "Oh no, she's angry!" he cackled, pointing at the horse. "Look everybody, the royal beast's got a temper, perfect for the gram!" The crowd's reactions ranged from disbelief to outright disdain. "Idiot," someone muttered under their breath. Another voice, louder this time, rang out, "Enough! Show some respect!" But Doug wasn't listening. He was in his own little spotlight, the self-appointed lead in what he clearly thought was a comedy show. "Relax, folks," he said with a theatrical twirl. "I'm just having a little fun. Lighten up. It's not like—" Before he could finish, the guard stepped forward, the heavy thud of his boot against the cobblestone slicing through the tension like a knife. His voice, deep and commanding, boomed across the square. "Sir, you have violated royal protocol. Step away from the line and place your hands behind your back." For a moment, the square froze. The crowd erupted into applause, many cheering as if to say, "Finally, someone put him in his place." Cameras zoomed in, eager to capture the confrontation in crystal clear HD. But Doug wasn't done. Not yet. He flashed his trademark smirk, the one that screamed, "I'm untouchable." "Oh really? What are you gonna do? Call the queen on me?" he jeered, puffing out his chest in mock defiance. And then it happened. The horse, seemingly tired of Doug's antics, reared its head and let out a deafening whinny, its eyes flashing with a mix of annoyance and warning. The sound was loud enough to make even the bravest onlooker flinch. But Doug, he stumbled back, arms flailing as he lost his balance. In one glorious, cinematic moment, his feet slid out from under him, and he landed flat on his back in a puddle of his own spilled coffee. The crowd erupted into laughter, the kind that starts small but builds until it feels like the entire square is shaking. Phones were raised higher, capturing every second of Doug's graceless tumble. "Serves him right," someone shouted. "Bet that wasn't part of the show," another quipped. Doug, flustered and drenched, tried to scramble to his feet, but the damage was done. His self-assured grin was replaced with a sheepish grimace as the laughter around him grew louder. And then the guard spoke again. This time, his tone was calm but firm, with a gravitas that silenced the crowd. He leaned slightly forward, his gaze piercing through the chaos. "In Britain, we honor tradition," he said. "It would do you well to learn the same." The words landed heavier than any stone Doug could have thrown. The crowd, now completely on the guard's side, broke into another round of applause. Doug, meanwhile, looked like he wanted the cobblestones to swallow him whole. The guard adjusted his hat, stepped back into position, and resumed his statue-like stance. Order restored, dignity intact. As for Doug, well, he slinked away, wet, embarrassed, and clutching his phone like it was the last shred of his ego. And somewhere, deep in the heart of London, the spirit of tradition stood just a little taller. Doug lay sprawled in the puddle, his crumpled shirt clinging to his chest like a wet napkin. His phone, the supposed tool of his internet fame, now dangled from his hand, its screen smeared with coffee and defeat. The world didn't look so viral anymore. Around him, the crowd closed in like a jury ready to deliver its verdict. A woman in a sharp trench coat was the first to speak, her voice dripping with disdain. "You're a disgrace. People like you give tourists a bad name." Another louder voice chimed in from the back. "Go back to America, buddy. We don't need your kind here." Doug's eyes darted around, his grin now replaced by something resembling panic. He tried to laugh it off, waving a dismissive hand. "Come on, it's just a joke," he said, though his voice wavered. But the crowd wasn't buying it. One man, furiously typing on his phone, shouted as if announcing breaking news. "Tweeting it now. Tourist attacks royal horse. Gets what he deserves. Video coming soon." The murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Phones were raised higher, capturing every second of Doug's misery. The hashtags practically wrote themselves. #royal revenge, #respect the guard, #instant karma. Doug staggered to his feet, his soaked shoes squelching with every step. He glanced back at the guard, who was already returning to his position. The tall figure adjusted his hat with a deliberate grace, as if to say, "My job here is done." Beside him, the horse, now calm and regal, raised its head proudly, a silent reminder of its unflinching dignity. The crowd broke into applause. It wasn't the polite, obligatory kind you hear at the end of a mediocre speech. No, this was thunderous, genuine. Applause that said, "Thank you for standing up for something that matters." Amid the cheers, a small boy tugged on his mother's sleeve. "Mum," he whispered loudly, his eyes wide with awe. "Can I be a guard when I grow up?" His mother smiled, ruffling his hair. "If you can stand as tall and proud as that man, then yes, you can." Meanwhile, Doug, drenched in humiliation, tried to slink away unnoticed. But the crowd wasn't done with him yet. A chorus of sarcastic remarks followed him as he shuffled toward the nearest exit. "Careful, mate, don't slip again." "Hope that coffee wasn't too expensive," one particularly loud teenager added. "Welcome to the internet, buddy. You're going to be famous for all the wrong reasons." Doug muttered something under his breath, something that sounded suspiciously like "stupid Britain," as he disappeared into the throng of tourists. But his swagger was gone, replaced by a sheepish, defeated shuffle. The guard, now back in his silent vigil, stood unshaken, his posture as impeccable as ever. The square seemed calmer now, as if order had been restored. And though he didn't show it, the guard had won more than a confrontation that day. He had reminded everyone watching of the value of respect, dignity, and tradition. As the crowd slowly dispersed, snippets of conversation lingered in the air. That was incredible. He didn't even flinch. Exactly why we should never take things like this for granted. Somewhere, deep within the folds of the internet, Doug's downfall was already making the rounds. The videos, complete with captions like "Tourist versus Tradition," "Spoiler, Tradition wins," and "How not to behave in London," were spreading like wildfire. Doug Patterson from Minnesota had officially gone viral, but not in the way he'd hoped. And as the guard resumed his silent post, the horse beside him standing tall and proud, a faint sense of justice lingered in the air. For once, tradition had the last laugh.